I think Brian Kelly was brought in to win these games. These are the ones that he was brought in to win. LSU is always going to throw their heaviest punch against the Bamas, the Georgias. They're ultimately 9 times out of 10. You don't have to worry about the LSU brand showing up. It doesn't matter if you roll out Ed Ogeron, Les Miles, Charlie McClendon, or Brian Kelly. It don't matter. LSU is going to be ready to play in those games. It's always been the games that have snake bit LSU have been the UABs, the Mississippi States, the Arkansas, the week after you emotionally ride this high against Alabama. Those have been the ones in the weeks that have always, really haunted the LSU football program. And now to see the way that they have reacted in those spots really since the Florida State game, right? I mean, go back with me. What's the biggest letdown of year one for Brian Kelly? To me, it's not the Tennessee game. I mean, that sucked. But ultimately, I think you got one clunker every year, right? Where you're just like, we had no idea what the hell was going on that day. It couldn't catch a kick. You couldn't even get your best players in the field. For whatever reason, Harold Perkins only played 9 plays that day. I mean, there was just crazy stuff was happening. It's the Florida State game for me, right? I mean, it's the game that you ultimately look at this team and you're like, man, they did some stuff that just very much is outside of their personality. Now, there's a lot to, forgive on that because it was the first game. It was the first time the coach had been with the team. It was a new starting quarterback. It was a lot of excuses kind of built in on why there was ultimately, the loss in week 1. But, I mean, outside of that, it has been a progression of, just a small percentage of getting better every day that has gotten LSU to this point, in which why I believe, like we said a couple of minutes ago, this Georgia game, is by no means, I remember you might have been there in 2019 with LSU going to the league championship in Atlanta. I was there. It felt like a formality, right? I mean, it kind of just felt like and here's the sad part about it was that Georgia team was good. I mean, that was like Jordan Davis and all those guys that were young. They were like sophomores on that team, right? Trayvon Walker was a youngster on that team. I mean, they had players on the field, but it just kind of felt like LSU shows up, gets off the bus, they gonna win. Right? I mean, and they were the clear-cut number 1 team in the country. I know the polls, but people around the game felt like that LSU team's a little different than everybody else. This Georgia team kind of feels a little bit different than everybody else in the league and in the game this year. But by no means do they feel unbeatable. By no means do I think that LSU's defense, Matt House, Perkins, Ojulari, and the crew are not going to have something dialed up for Stetson Bennett and that offense that at times looked very pedestrian. Now, Georgia's defense versus Denbrock, Daniels, and the crew, a little worried. I mean, a little anxious on how LSU is going to handle it. Concerned to a point where I believe they can't move the ball or score? Hell no. Hell no. I mean, they got cover guys, but they don't have 4 cover guys that can line up and guard Brian Thomas, can guard Malik Neighbors, a healthy Kayshawn. Kayshawn with just a little flu-like symptom that was haunting him all throughout the day on Saturday. Just take a break, buddy.
But if you get the Jaden that we saw yesterday, I understand who they played. I get it. But they weren't a terrible team. But if I'm looking at this correctly, 297 yards throwing, ran for 129. That is as good as you can play. It's Jaden Daniels' best game as an LSU Tiger, right? And it looked good. Like, it wasn't just, he played well. Mm-hmm. It looked like everything that you wanted to see coming off of what happened against Arkansas last week, where it was, oh, God, we're kind of reverting back to the mean, where it's, he's not throwing people open. He don't want to pull the trigger. Everything you saw Saturday was him anticipatory throws, running when he wanted to, probably stayed in a little too long, but he is your best player on offense right now. The offense is going through Jaden Daniels.
Absolutely.
John Emery can't hold on to the football, and I love the man to death, but you saw how much Josh Williams means to the team as well. Like, Malik Neighbors is great. Kayshawn didn't play, but you can still see the offense and how you can score 40 points when Jaden Daniels plays that way.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think so too, man. I really do. I think that LSU is a problem.
If you're Georgia, you're nervous.
LSU's an issue. I don't think Georgia is though.
They should be.
I've got
points.
What's that?
Kentucky unranked held them to only 16 points.
Yeah, they're not good offensively.
Yeah.
Like
That's what I'm saying.
they can be good, right? Like there's some Saturdays where you're like, damn, they make good plays. It's a pretty good athlete. He can make some throws. He can hurt you with his legs if you get outside. But outside of that, you kind of look around
Harold Perkins track him
and
down.
you're like, exactly. I mean, you're
weird.
kind of like.
Is it like a lot of luck this season?
I don't know.
No,
I
they
don't
just haven't
think that
ran
you
into
can.
a problem
You can't go
yet.
undefeated in the SEC on luck.
I know.
You know what I
but-
mean? Like they're
but
good.
barely made
They're
it by,
solid.
I feel
But the
like.
They play
identity
down
of
their
their
competition.
team is defense and special teams.
Because when they want to crank it up to 11, Georgia is a problem. Like, you can see why they're the number one team in the country. Like, whenever they want to be all the way invested, it's like that's why there's probably some comparisons to. I mean, obviously Tennessee did it with the 2019 LSU team that fell by the wayside, but it's that type of feel where like if you're a Georgia fan or if you're in Georgia, we feel like we're the best team in the country. Like every
Guess
time
so.
you
Yeah,
line
and
it
they
up-
are.
Yeah, they are.
They are. They absolutely
But
are.
if you're an
Almost
LSU
beat them?
fan, you feel like
They
you got a
absolutely
shot.
are. But you're
Yeah, you do.
you're the best team in the country that feels, at least from this vantage point, like you're beatable. I thought last year's Georgia team felt more unbeatable than this one
I do
did.
too.
Now, Alabama went to the league championship and beat them in Atlanta, but had another shot at them, and Georgia obviously got them at the end. But, I mean, think about all those first-round picks they lost off that defense. I would even say losing George Pickens last year was a bigger loss than anything that they have a deficit on this year offensively. They don't have that guy. Now, I know Pickens is a stud, but I'm telling you, they just don't have that big game-breaking wide receiver. I mean, that short little white dude they throw the ball to all the time.
McConkey.
What is he going to
Lad McConkey.
Jordan Culotta?
I mean, he looks like a middle school player. Like his uniform looks very small. You know what I mean? Like, especially when he stands next to those tight ends.
Right.
Mom, where's my socks?
You know what I mean? Like, obviously, Bowers and Washington are the mismatches. I mean, those are the guys that you have to account for. And I don't know if LSU has anybody that can guard them one-on-one. But I do know this, is that LSU can get to Stetson Bennett. And if you can get to him before he has his mind make up where he's going to go with the ball, then it don't matter if, Harold Perkins is guarding Washington down the – it doesn't matter. So, I mean, I know House is going to be ready for him.
Because the biggest thing is you have to stop the run. Like, their best offensive game was Oregon in game 1, and Georgia came out and ran the ball for like 20 yards on the first 3 plays. So then Oregon's just all bought in on the run, and that's whenever they start to hit McConkey on the little crosser or Bowers down the side. Like, you have to stop the run. But at the same time, you saw what Georgia is whenever they need to step up. Like against Tennessee, even though the score wasn't a huge deficit, I mean, they completely dominated that game.
That's
But
they're as
remember
good as they want to
Well, right.
be.
So
26 to 22.
They
Missouri,
played down,
that's
but at the same
crazy.
time, when they have to turn it on,
They
will.
remind me
They do.
very much of early LSU Les Miles teams that could just choke you out because they were bigger, stronger, faster than you. And that was his great grace. That's why he knew he could act like that, because they were going to win despite him. Right? Like, it was like, I could just put it in my defense's hand. I don't ever have to throw the ball, because if I do, only, like he would say, what do you say? I can throw it, but 2 things that can happen are bad.
Right.
It's like, you dumb fuck, man. You dumbass. But it just.
It could bleed or be a
But then he
turnover.
would win. Then he'd win 24-20. And it's like, told you. It's just like, ugh.
Kiss you on the mouth.
Georgia feels a lot like that this year, where they can kind of toy with you, and they don't have to be their best that day to get you. Like, they can just kind of smother you, right? And for whatever reason, as LSU comes down here, and I don't want to make this week about Georgia, because we will get to Georgia next week, and I think LSU definitely has they got a mountain to climb this week with Texas A&M, because I think A&M's going to they're just going to be motivated. They're going to be locked in. They're going to be focused. They're going to want to beat LSU. So anytime you get off the bus against a team like that, you better you better be dialed in. And I think LSU will be. I think Brian Kelly will have his team ready to play. But if you just look down the line, and we can do that here. They're not doing that over at the football ops building. But here on a podcast and, talking head type format, you can say, let's look ahead. And from LSU's standpoint, the matchup does not feel as
lopsided.
Just right. I mean, as dire as it once did at a certain point of the season. I mean, tee this thing up and kick it off. See what happens.